Most entrepreneurs think about growth in one way: sell more products, add more customers, hire more people. But what if there was another way to grow your business dramatically without having to sell more stuff? My guest today says there is. Welcome, or hopefully welcome back to The Reluctant Entrepreneur. Joining me today is Marty Fahncke, a seasoned marketer and mergers and acquisitions advisor with more than 30 years of experience growing and scaling businesses and over 20 years of experience in mergers and acquisitions. Over the course of his career, Marty has helped companies scale to more than $1 billion in total revenue and has executed more than $450 million in mergers and acquisitions transactions. Interestingly, Marty's introduction to acquisitions came early when a business he co-launched with friends was acquired for 7 figures after just 18 months. That experience launched a career helping entrepreneurs buy businesses, sell businesses, and grow through acquisition. Today, Marty is a certified mergers and acquisition advisor with a partner at Westbound Road, where he helps founders navigate the complex processes of buying and selling companies. In this episode, we're going to talk about 2 topics that every entrepreneur should understand: how acquisitions can be used to grow a company dramatically, and how to position your business so that when that time comes, you can sell it for maximum value. Are you ready for this? Let's get started. Hey, Marty, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here today. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Wow. Thank you, Mike. I'm really excited to be here. I have to say, you are definitely going to win the award for best intro for a podcast I've ever been on. That was phenomenal.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, it's easy to write a good intro when there's a fascinating guest. So you make it easy. So
thank you.
Kudos back to you, my friend. So, Marty, let's go back to the beginning. Before you became involved in mergers and acquisitions, what were you doing professionally, and what first drew you into the world of business?
Well, I was kind of a born entrepreneur, I think. My family, for the most part, was either in the military or entrepreneurs, or sometimes both. So my grandfather was a pilot or a tail gunner, actually, in World War II, and then he came home and started a construction company and weathered the construction bust of 1979 and went through all that. My father was also in the military, but on the side, he was an auto mechanic. And I always had an entrepreneurial streak in me and had lots of different things going on when I was younger. So I went the corporate route for the first several years of my career. I was, I sold water purifiers. I worked in a call center, and I sold computer peripherals all around the Midwest for several years as well. So I was kind of doing the corporate thing, had a real job before the entrepreneurial bug finally really kicked in and stuck permanently in my kind of mid 20s.
Couldn't push it off any longer. Nothing reluctant about your journey. Did you find when you were working in the corporate world, obviously there's a lot of takeaways. You learn a lot of things. I did also work in the corporate world for a long time before I started my business 34 years ago. Did you learn positive things, or did you learn like, oh, I'm not going to do that? Was there as much negative affirmation in what not to do as there was positive affirmations in terms of what to do?
There was both, for sure. I saw a lot of things. I was with a company. I was with 2 companies that had a lot of growth, very rapid growth. One went from, I think, around probably $80 million a year to $2 billion a year. Again, it actually got acquired by Cincinnati Bell and grew like crazy. And so I was able to see what hyper growth looked like, and see, what to do right, what to do wrong, and learn an awful lot at that company. And then a few years later, I was working at a company that again had some hyper growth. And that one was actually quite interesting because it went from about a $200 million company to probably a $500 million company while I was there. But not long after I left, and I'm not taking any credit for this, by the way. Not longer after I left, it really stumbled and it actually went out of business not too many years later. And so it was really interesting seeing how those businesses were able to grow, but then one was very successful and went on to become a public publicly traded company, et cetera. And the other one crashed and burned. And so I learned a lot from that. But I met a lot of great people. One of my biggest mentors came from one of those gigs, and there's certainly something fun about with the one company I was with. We had access to a private jet and things like that. So that when you're 22, 23 years old, and you're one of the youngest directors at a company that's ever been, and you could fly around on the company jet, there's some pretty fun stuff to that when you go from that to the entrepreneurial slog of working in a spare bedroom and trying to figure out how to pay the bills as an entrepreneur. So there's definitely some pluses.
Sitting in the last row of a middle seat on Southwest, which is typically an entrepreneur's, that's the closest thing they're going to get to a private jet. You have a private you have a private seat between two big fellas. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, very interesting. You've said that your first real exposure to acquisitions came when a company you helped start with friends was acquired after only 18 months. I mentioned that in the intro. What happened there, and what did that experience teach you?
Yeah, so that was a company that was, when you hear the term grassroots, it was the most grassroots business you could ever think of, because it was started, it was a soccer product, a soccer sporting goods product, and it was literally started in the parks across from our houses. So I lived in Utah at the time, and my business partners lived in California in two different locations. And every weekend we would go to the parks across from in our neighborhoods, and we would sell this product to the parents and the grandparents and the kids and whatever else. And my kids would drag along and they would demonstrate the product. It was a kicking training device. And so I say it's grassroots because we were out there on the soccer field selling this on the grass, right?
Quite literally.
We literally were. So we used what we learned from those interactions, those face-to-face interactions, and what made people excited to buy it, and what price points we could charge. And we learned that we loved when grandparents came along, because they didn't buy one or two, they'd buy 5 or 6 when they had lots of grandkids. So we learned really a whole lot by having that grassroots approach. And I quickly leveraged that and got us onto QVC. Well, I mentioned that we realized quickly at the parks that the grandparents were the big buyers. Well, QVC had a lot of grandparent buyers. Yeah. So we got onto QVC. We did really, really well. We created a TV ad. We did really, really well with that. We had it on the United States, Canada, Brazil, Japan. We just opened the throttles and went crazy. And 18 months later, a company called and said, "Hey, we'd like to buy you guys." And we're like, I had no clue, okay, what does that mean? Well, we'll give you guys $1.5 million cash. And we're like, again, I'm in my 20s. I'm like, that's a lot of money, So
that's a down payment. That's a down payment on a private jet, Marty.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. So we said, yeah. And we didn't even negotiate. We just said yes. And, it's kind of funny looking back now. And so, what was interesting is I later on actually got involved in acquisitions. What I learned that who bought us was a private equity firm. I didn't know what a private equity firm was at the time. And the reason they bought us was because they were doing a roll-up. I didn't know what a roll-up was at the time either. I've since learned what all that means. I found out that had we, instead of taking cash, I went back after I learned what I learned and got to know some people and actually had some interactions with the private equity firm later on in life. If we would have not taken cash and taken equity in the roll-up, which we probably wouldn't have done because we'd have been like, we don't even know what this means. But if we would have, we'd have made about $24 million.
Wow.
But instead we, thought, oh, we're $1.5 million in cash, let's take it. And so had I known what I know then, what I know now, I would have hired somebody like me to say, hey, we got this people that came and offered us $1.5 million. What should we do? And what I would have told myself then is A, negotiate, and you probably could have got 2 or 2.5 million, and B, take half of that money in cash and the other half in rolled equity. And I would have been happy with, $500,000 or 300 grand. And then 5 years later with 8 million, however,
sure.
$8 or $9 million. Right. So I would have told myself that. And that was one of the big mistakes we made was not getting help and advice from somebody who knew what they were doing. We just signed the papers and cashed the checks. So,
which I think a lot of people do, particularly early in their business. When I started my business 34 years ago, which I still own today, about 2 or 3 years into the life of the business, we're struggling, obviously, because that's when the vultures show up, right? When you're struggling. And
Yep.
you can see them circling, and these were either private equity companies or in this case, someone else, another company in our space.
It's very common.
They reached out to us, and it was a very friendly conversation. It wasn't hostile at all, and flew me out to another state to see, and we talked everything about except money. I didn't want to talk about money at that point because I was too afraid that what happened to you would happen to me. They'd throw a number out, and I'd go, "Oh my God, we're struggling. I can barely eat. I can barely cover payroll. It's so much work. I'm working 80 hours a week." I was afraid to hear a number, so I put off the offer, and I ended up saying no, thank you, and I'm grateful today because that was
Before you ever got a number?
before I got a number. Yeah, in fact,
Interesting. Okay.
a few years ago, Marty, a holding company, a portfolio type company that is common in our industries, known in our industry, came and wanted to have lunch with me, and I knew what that was going to be about. And they said that they want to get into the specific space that we're in, and they did their research, and they thought my company was, the best in class for that particular space. And they wanted to make an offer. Well, they wanted, first of all, do the NDA and the discovery and, due diligence, and then follow that up with an all-cash offer. And much to their chagrin, I told them I don't want to hear the offer, that my exit strategy is different than most. I'm not going to sell the company. I'm going to keep it as a family-run company. The next generation is now running the company. And
Great.
My windfall will be, my full pay and all the perks, and I'm not cheap for the rest of my life. And then the company just transfers to you. I can't take it with me. I'd rather see it in the family and all that. And they said, "Well, how can you say that without knowing what the offer would be? We're prepared to do a really decent multiple." And I'm like, I don't want to hear it because I will still say no, and I will. On the first day I'm having some troubles, I will kick myself and I won't sleep at night. So I just don't want to hear it. And I said, I'm so grateful. I'm honored. I'm just like puffed up, like beyond belief. But I'm afraid if I hear that number and say no, I will just have this regret for the rest of my life, maybe, or I'll have the what if syndrome. So it just wasn't time for me. That didn't follow my exit strategy. But
Sure.
But I wanted to meet because I thought maybe they would throw around some numbers. But then as we came kind of close to that point, I was afraid to hear it. And I'm still curious today. This was several years ago. I'm still very curious today what that would have been. But it only would have been, morbid curiosity. And I thought, well, I could live the rest of my life being curious of what that number would have been, or I could live the rest of my life with regret. And I'm committed to this path that I'm on, and I don't want any potential distractions. But that was me. I just wasn't ready, nor am I now. Going back to a point you made earlier, you said you worked for a couple of companies that grew fast, and one eventually did the IPO and became public and was successful, and the other failed. I'm not sure what the percentages are. I forget what the percentages are, but there's a sizable percentage of businesses that fail profitably, meaning that they just run out of cash because they're growing too fast. They don't fully understand the difference between just uncontrolled rapid growth and proper scaling. And when you scale, everything has to come up, and your infrastructure. I've said this on the show before, but if we wanted to add 40% more revenue, 40% more sales in 1 year, which would be aggressive, we would have to put in 200% more capital to fund that growth because we're a factory. We build large machines. That would mean we may need a larger factory. That means a new building. That means more people. That means more service support for the products we're selling. That means more inventory. It's like when I was a kid, my mother would buy me clothes that were 2 sizes too big when I was in elementary school because she didn't want to buy me clothes twice a year. So when I first got clothes for the next 2 sizes, they were way too big for me. I had to grow into them, right? And then once they got to the point where they started to fit, and then they become a little too short, then she'd buy me the next 2 sizes up. And I think happens in business a lot. If you want to grow 10%, it's not linear. It's the investment you have to put in to not just gain that 10%, but be able to functionally handle it. You have to plan for 30% growth, right? So I think a lot of businesses would be profitable were it not for the growth. And the most profitable we've ever been is when we stayed steady for a period of time, flat, which most business owners would go, that's terrible. But when you're bootstrapping your business on a shoestring budget, rapid growth is a luxury most small businesses can't afford, at least in the early days, right?
Yeah.
Now we can after 34 years, obviously, we're considerably larger than we were when we first started. But I used to mix up growth as a solution to every problem we have. And I would bring it in QVC, and we would have more problems.
Yeah, I mentioned QVC with my first business that I sold, and I went on to have QVC as a main channel of my revenue for years to come with a number of other companies down the road, and eventually became a QVC on-air host and everything, not host, but on-air guest and presenter and stuff. So it was a big part. I did about $100 million worth of product on QVC. I would have people coming to me and saying, "Hey, I want to get my product on QVC. Yeah, I just know that's where that'll set my company up for long-term success." And I had to tell many of them, I said, the last thing you need is to get your product on QVC. And I hear it with Walmart. Oh, we got a big order from Walmart, or a big order from Costco, or a big order from Sam. And that can wipe a business out overnight. Is some big retailer places a huge order and they don't pay for a really long time, and so then you've got to find the cash to go and manufacture it and ship it and do whatever else, and then they slow pay it, and then they've got, some of them have return privileges and things like that, and I've
chargebacks,
seen
all that stuff,
chargebacks, everything. And I've seen multiple business put out of business by taking that magical order that's going to take us to the next level, and it actually puts them out of business. I've seen it many times, unfortunately.
I read an article about, this is several years ago, about Rubbermaid, who was approached by, I think it was Amazon, and Rubbermaid makes all the containers for food and all that stuff, and they were. It wasn't Amazon. It was Walmart. I think this is before Amazon became the Amazon we know today. And they were basically ordered to set up manufacturing in China. And they were making everything in the U.S. in the early days. And they ended up, long story short, with a minimal profit margin, because Walmart is the big gorilla in the room, or at least they were at that time. And they were able to say, no, you need to cut your costs. Rather than saying, this is our cost, mark it up, they're like, no. We'll tell you what the retail will be and what spread we want. And they ended up, they couldn't service other customers because Walmart tied them up. And they ended up breaking their deal with Walmart. And I'm not sure if they came back to the U.S. or not, but they just realized that they're going to work exceptionally hard. They're going to have one client, which is a concentration that no bank likes. And next thing you know, another wannabe Tupperware type company will come out, cut those prices in half, and they'll be dropped and probably out of business. This I don't know, 100-plus-year-old company can just go away. And I'm not sure if they did go away or if Tupperware is still there, but it's certainly, if it is still around, it's not what we grew up with when our moms baked cakes for us, parties. And Tupperware parties and all that kind of stuff. but they had dollar signs in their eyes, and they followed it, and it was seduction and
Yep.
an imprisonment in many ways. Many entrepreneurs struggle into business ownership almost by accident. You claim that you are a born entrepreneur, which seems to show and bear out. Looking back, was there a moment when you realized that this was the path that was going to become your career, entrepreneurship? Was there a defining moment, an epiphany, or was it like a pinball in a pinball machine? Just the bumpers just bounced you into that corner of the world?
It was like the pinball machine. A number of different events happened. So, like I said, my family is very heavily military. I mean, my dad, my mom, my aunts, my uncles, like everybody's been in the military for generations, on multiple sides of my family. So I was expected to go into the military, and I actually, signed the papers to join the Navy, and they were really wanting me for their nuclear program, and they were offering me $100,000 signing bonus.
Wow.
And I got a 99 on my ASVAB, which is basically about as high as you can get on it. And I was ready to go. And through some certain circumstances, that didn't happen. I didn't wind up joining the Navy. And so I went the corporate route, and I thought, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do. But I found myself very restless in the corporate world. I mean, I was learning a lot. I was having fun. I'm making things happen, but it just never quite felt right. And I was kind of bouncing around a little bit. I was only staying a couple of years at each place. And I remember my dad sitting me down. He had retired from the military and was working with the post office, which is a very common thing back then. The veterans go to work for the post office. And I remember very vividly him sitting me down and saying, "Son, you can't just keep bouncing around from job to job every couple of years. You need to pick one thing and stick with it until you retire." And
Old school.
I'm like, I don't think I'm built that way, Dad. I think I'm built to be a little more flexible and a little more, I just don't think that's right for me. He said, "Well, I'm telling you, you're going to throw your life away." Not long, by the way, not long after that venture that I sold the business and made a nice little pile of cash. He was, I think, on 18 years into the post office, something like that. And they actually, let him go before he was able to get his retirement, his full retirement. And he came to me and he said, probably one of two that I can think of, two, maybe three times in his entire life he ever admitted that he was wrong. But he came to me and admitted, he said, "You know what?" He says, "You're doing really well. I'm over here getting, hosed by the post office. And I was wrong. And you're having a lot more fun. You're making a lot more money than I am." And he goes, and of course he was, like I said, retired military and working for the government, and, nice steady job, but I was actually doing better than he was. And so I realized, like, there's something to this. And that's when I kind of really decided that I was going to strike out on my own. And so I've been in just a series of entrepreneurial ventures really ever since. So
I think, to be fair to your father, he probably was not wrong when he first came up with that idea that you have a job for life, because earlier than that, you basically, unless you screwed up or something, you had a job for life. Right. Companies committed to hiring people, multi-generations, and people stayed multi-generations at a company. I think your father's advice was probably well-founded historically, but became obsolete in closer to modern times, right?
I think he was probably 10 years too late in that advice. I mean, that would have been in the early 90s that he gave me that advice. And I think that, I think that the early 80s up to the mid 80s, that held true. You still had people who worked for IBM or, financial services or things like that. I think we saw a real shift in the mid to late 80s, especially like 1987 with the Milliken junk bond scandal and the savings and loans collapses and all those things. But I'm really showing my age here. I think the mid to late 80s was when that shifted, when kind of corporations were like, "We don't care, we're just going to lay you off and whatever else." And so he was right, but he was a few years late
It's 2 years off. He was
to
right in the wrong
the
decade.
party.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. He
Yeah.
was right. He would have been absolutely right 10 years earlier. But
Well, I think a lot of that, you pinned it exactly in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s. Before that, corporations were product and customer centric. That's where they put their investment money. Make a great product, make money. And then somewhere in that milk and, the whole thrift scandal and all the things that came along with it, greed set in, and corporations started being beholden to their shareholders, not their customers, not their product. So
Yeah.
the vision, when they look ahead and forecast, they don't look at making investments that will help them 10 years from now. They look at investments that will make the quarterly report look positive, because analysts say we expect you to grow 12% this year, and if they hit 10%, their stock crashes. Even though they grew 10%, they didn't hit expectations, right?
Exactly.
And their shareholders are angry, and they cause problems. And then there's takeovers and all this stuff. So I think
I'm just thinking of another pivotal point in the 80s, which I'm guessing would have been 1986, if I'm not, with the movie Wall Street, right?
absolutely,
Greed is good.
Greed is good.
I mean, so, there was a big shift in that time frame. So,
yeah. Now that you've spent decades helping businesses grow and scale, what were some of the biggest lessons that you learned in those early years that still guide you on how to operate today?
the biggest lesson I've learned is never, and you actually just talked about it a second ago, which is really funny because it two completely different topics, and we're going to come to the same conclusion. The biggest lesson that I learned in being with hyper growing entrepreneurial businesses is to not forget your customer. So I'm going to fast forward into another decade here. This is in the 2000s. I was working with a company. We were on a very fast growth path. We grew from about 60 million to $800 million in about 2 years. Okay, I'm talking really rapid growth. This was a private equity backed firm and a lot of that growth was through acquisitions, et cetera. And I remember sitting at an executive dinner, and the CEO pulled out this book, it was an actual book, but it was a brochure for a private island that he was looking to buy. And everybody was like, "Oh, that's great. Look at this, these cabanas and this beautiful house and, the exclusive lawn, blah, blah, blah." And it hit me plain as day. We have forgotten why we exist as a business. And I had been kind of seeing little hints of it before that. It was like, but we've forgotten that, our job was to create great products and sell it to people to improve their lives. That was like our mission statement at that time. And we did it really well for many years until that time. And then the focus became on growth at all costs and our stock price. And I mentally quit my job that night because I was like, we have lost sight of where we're supposed to be. And I actually quit my job within a couple of weeks of that, by the way. And there were at the time, there were 13 executives on the executive team for this company. Within 60 days of me resigning, 5 other executives resigned. And within 1 year of that happening, the CEO had been ousted by the private equity firm and replaced by somebody else because he had given up majority control. He had sold 60% of the company. And it all could have been avoided had we just kept to create a great product and sell it to people to help their lives, and it will all stay good. But the focus was shifted. So, you talked about that way back in the day, and even, that's still the way you should run your business, right? Serve your customers, create a great project, take care of your employees, and the rest will take care of itself. And if you start focusing on other things, that's when bad things start to happen.
I think one of the best poster child companies that is an example of that is Boeing. Boeing has been building aircraft for well over 100 years. And, not far after the Wright brothers, Boeing started building, rudimentary aircraft. And there was a time through the 70s and maybe early 80s where pilots, commercial pilots, had a saying, if it ain't Boeing, I'm not going. And when Airbus came up, there was a lot of resistance in professional pilots because it's not a Boeing, right? And then Boeing bought McDonnell Douglas, and sometime in the 80s, I believe it was, and they adopted McDonnell Douglas's shareholder first philosophy, which up to that point, Boeing had a customer first, product first philosophy and was wildly successful. They pioneered one of the first, not the first, but one of the first commercially successful jet aircraft in 1959, the 707, when I flew on when I was a kid. They obviously pioneered the Queen of the Skies, the 747, which has been in production. It's out of production now, but it had more than a 50-year run. And it's the standard by which all other aircraft are measured. And then because, in my opinion anyway, because they focused on shareholder value and return on equity and all that stuff, short-term stuff, they started taking shortcuts. Their 737 MAX-8 is a great...
Keep crashing.
They keep falling out of the sky. The minor problem. We'll fix it.
Doors blowing off of them. And it's insanity what's going on at Boeing.
Yeah. And they just, they're struggling with their 777X, to get it certified. It's been in, almost ready to go for years, and they keep finding more problems with it. Even the Dreamliner, the 787, which arguably is a beautiful plane, had its share of problems when it first rolled out. They're complicated. There's more than 1 million parts in it, so it's complicated. But they had that down. They were the undisputed leaders in that field. They were the benchmark by which every other commercial aircraft company and military aircraft company measured themselves against. How close can we get to Boeing? And now there's pilots that feel very uncomfortable. They don't trust Boeing. They lost the trust in a few short years relative to how long they've been in business.
I get hesitant when I fly on a Boeing. I really do. It's interesting how much you and I have in common, because as soon as you said Boeing, I'm like, I hope this guy's going the direction I think. And you're right. They've just, that company's completely lost its way.
Yeah,
and it's because they forgot to take care of their customer and forgot to take care of their employees, because the way they're treating their employees is pretty bad these days too.
Yeah,
so
100%.
And so what happens? You get crappy product, and
people die.
Competitors start to eat their lunch. And people die.
And people die in this case. Problem,
in this case, it does.
Yeah, it's not like you're making video games and you disappoint a kid on Christmas Day.
Right.
People die.
Right.
You talk about something called growth through acquisition. For entrepreneurs who've never thought about buying another business, what exactly does that mean?
So growth through acquisition is basically a strategy where you can grow your business oftentimes more effectively and with less risk than an organic way. So let's talk about your machine, your manufacturing business. Let's use that as an example. So if you tell me you want to double your manufacturing business, you just told me that might cost a 200% investment to do that, right? You'd have to go out, you've got to train new people, you've got to, set up new warehouses and buildings and machinery and all that takes and everything. And then somebody's got to go get those orders from your customers, whoever's buying your product. Somebody's got to go sell those orders to those customers, et cetera. So it's very risky to grow a business organically. By acquisition, growing through acquisition de-risks it substantially. So if you have a business doing $5 million a year manufacturing these machines that you make, and across town your competitor has a business manufacturing these things, and but they already have the people, they already have the machinery, they already have the facilities. Is it easier for you to try and take out that competitor and try and grow incrementally, or just buy the competitor and put the two together. And then you have instant, all the things you need are already there. And because you have duplicates of a lot of things, you can actually improve things. So if you've got two foremen or two
Right.
inspectors or whatever, you don't need that many.
Yeah, you get rid of the
You can consolidate,
redundancies. Yeah.
get the redundancy, so you actually have more profitability and less risk because they already have a client base, they already have employees you don't have to go hire new people. Their machinery is already up and running and in place. You're not going to have so growing through acquisition is something that a lot of entrepreneurs think is only for the big guys. It's only for airlines and banks and things like that, but a lot of it happens at a much smaller scale, and it should be something that entrepreneurs look at because it can be very, very effective. If you want to, sell more stuff, because my thing is how to double your revenue without having to sell more stuff, right? That's how you put it in the introduction, and that's what I talk about. Trying to sell more stuff can be really hard. You hire salespeople, they may not work out. You do marketing campaigns, they may not work out. The more you spend in advertising, the less effective it gets, is what most people experience. And so just by trying to organically scale your way to growth can be very difficult. And we see a lot of businesses, and we talked about earlier in this conversation, that sometimes scaling too much can put you right out of business. Whereas growth through acquisition, if you do it right and if you do it strategically, can de-risk that substantially. So it's a known quantity that you're getting, and you put that together and you get an economy of scale. I'll tell you one quick story. So I had a business, very small e-commerce business that was doing about $1.5 million a year. I had a competitor that was doing about $2 million a year. They were really, really fierce competitor. We acquired that competitor, and their team was really good. My team was really good. We all had different skill sets. We acquired that competitor. So I'm over here doing $1.5 million a year. He's over here doing $2 million a year. We acquired them. Within 2 years, where do you think our revenues were?
Well, I would assume you probably are more than the sum of the parts. I would assume that the press involved in that and the increase in, assuming you kept 100% of their customers coming in, that probably expanded the revenue even more. So you said one was 1.5, one was 2. That would be 3.5. I'm going to say 4 or 5.
That's a great guess. And that's a guess that most people would expect. We did $30 million at the end of our second year. Just because I took out one of my number one competitors. So now we're collaborating instead of competing. Their best people were really good at stuff my team wasn't good at, and my best people were good at stuff that his team wasn't good at. And it was just a perfect collaboration of two very entrepreneurial guys who put the businesses together, and we went and did $30 million. Now, that guy Brett went on. After that, we sold, and then after that, he went and started another company, and then he actually sold that one to Adobe for $650 million. So Brett was a great guy. I really liked working with Brett. But that's an example.
He's going to watch the show.
One.
He's going to watch the show and go, "Oh, there's Marty, my buddy Marty." But he's going to watch it from a leather chair in a G5. Yeah, he's going to be in a G5.
He doesn't have he actually has one of the most simplistic. I'll tell you a story about Brett real quick. First time I went to go meet with him to talk about acquiring his business, and he had an office and then he had a warehouse and shipping center, all that kind of stuff. First time I went up there, and we were talking, and somebody said something, made a joke about garbage cans, and I'm like, "What's the joke about garbage cans?" And he goes, "Oh, I don't let anybody have garbage cans," and I'm like, "Why?" And he goes, "Well, we got a warehouse back here where constantly we have boxes coming in and out all day long. We unpack stuff. There's empty boxes. I just tell people, when you get a box, put it on your desk, throw the garbage in it. When it's full, fold the box up, put it in the dumpster, and grab a new box. Why would I pay $8 for a garbage can when we have free disposable garbage cans by the hundreds out in the warehouse?" And that was an example, though, of that entrepreneurial thought process, right? Like, okay, you've got 10 employees and a garbage can's $9 each. That's $90 that you can save on Rubbermaid garbage cans, right? Instead of
Right.
and save that and just use disposable boxes
Sure.
that were going to be thrown in the trash anyway. So Brett had that mentality that was very entrepreneurial and very like, how can and then take that $90 that you saved and deploy that in an ad campaign that's going to do a 3x return on investment. So turn that $90 into $270 and just keep doing it every single day. And that's what we did. So
That's
when
great.
we talk about private jets and everything else, but cardboard garbage cans, that's where the real rubber meets the road.
I wonder if he has cardboard trash cans in his yacht.
I'm going to ask him.
Something tells me he might not. You and I are quite aligned because you kind of queued me up for the next question. Many business owners think acquisitions are only for very large companies, right? That's kind of Wall Street kind of stuff.
Right.
Why do you believe smaller entrepreneurs should consider buying companies as part of their growth strategy beyond what you've already said in general?
Well, obviously, it's lower risk.
Yeah.
It's higher odds of success. And the other thing is it can cost you nothing, especially if you're a business that's valued under about $5 million. You can get an SBA 7A expansion loan, which is basically, so let's say you have a manufacturing, and let's say you need some new equipment to grow. And you can go to the SBA and you can get an expansion loan, and they will lend you the money to buy that new equipment. Okay. Or if you're a contractor and you need, new dump trucks and graders and tractors or something, and that you can go get an SBA loan to buy that equipment. Well, if you are a business who is looking to buy your competitor, and they are basically the exact same business as you, the SBA will give you up to $5 million as an expansion loan to acquire another business, because it's considered just an expansion. It's just like buying another building or buying some more equipment, but it's buying the assets of a business. And so you can get up to $5 million from the SBA to go buy another business and then immediately take all the revenues and profits from that business and put it into yours. So it's a smart way to go because it's low risk, it's high leverage, and you can do it oftentimes for literally no money out of your own pocket. Now, don't get confused with no money down. I'm not talking about all that kind of stuff that you hear about. That's not real. But you can do that for no money out of your pocket and highly leverage to your growth. So it's silly not to look at it as an option. Also, taking out your competitor reduces your costs because and consolidates your customer base, et cetera. So there's just so many benefits to looking at as an option to grow your business.
Yeah, there was a product synergistic to ours. It didn't compete with ours. It was something that if you have this, you probably have that too, right?
That's a great way to.
Yeah, and the manufacturer, the owner of the company, was getting older. I think he was in his mid-70s at the time of this particular thing I'm about to tell you. And that product made perfect sense for us to offer as part of our portfolio of products. So I reached out to him and said, I don't know if now's the right time. If not, just, file this under to be considered later. But we really like your product. And there was a time we were a distributor for that product. I said, we'd really like to pick that up again, but have you considered, selling the product to us? I'm not interested in buying your company. I'm interested in buying the product. And what we ended up negotiating, talk about no money down, was a 4-year royalty, a generous royalty. So we didn't make much money on them. We made some. We covered our costs and a little bit of profit. But I negotiated a max and a min. So there was an element of risk, but it was a safe risk because I knew, we had access to his books. I knew what he was selling. I knew we could sell better than he did. And because we have all the customers that need his product, they're all in one stable. So I negotiated a minimum amount. So if the product just went south, if it turned out it was a horrible idea for us to acquire and we couldn't sell any, he's going to make some money either way. Yet I made sure that if we explode it, that I don't have 4 years of unlimited royalties. So we min-maxed it, and boom, we got it. And we didn't inherit we inherited the product line, and his assets were only inventory. So we did not take on the liability associated with the company because it's, we didn't even keep the name. We changed the name of the product. So we were somewhat insulated from potential liability if something on an older product, which we did not manufacture, went south, and now we're the owners of the company and inherited the liability. That was all
Right.
gone, and it turned out to be a great deal. That was many years ago, and that's still a very popular product that we sell today. He was happy.
Yeah.
He got 4 years of income. He didn't have to do the hassle of selling it and then sticking around for a few years contractually to help us. And it was really a win for him. He had a minimum guaranteed income. And by the way, we ended up maxing out about 2 months short. So of the 4 years. So he maximized.
Worked perfectly. Yeah.
Worked perfectly. Yeah. So he was protected.
Well, you bring about a really good point, though, because what you're talking about is a strategic acquisition, or and it doesn't always mean you have to buy the company. It can be you buy pieces of it, assets, or else, but of supply chain, right? So I talked about competitors, but I always say when I'm working with a client and we're looking at how do we grow this business through acquisition, I always say, who do you pay money to, and who pays you money? Because those are always great places to look for acquisition. So let's say you're you're a plumbing business and you're doing really, really well and you're growing, but you buy all your plumbing supplies from a distributor that's over in the next county. What if you acquired that distributor and now you're buying your plumbing supplies from yourself? And all your competitors have to buy their plumbing supplies from you, right? So that's an example of buying something in your supply chain, or a complementary business that's an add-on to yours. We worked with an HVAC company in Texas, and we they were doing really, really great in the summertime, but were sitting around twiddling their thumbs in the wintertime. Well, we acquired an electrical business. We acquired a plumbing business, pool cleaning, pest control. And I'm missing, let's see, plumbing, electrical, HVAC, pool, pest control. I'm missing one. I can't remember. Anyway, by the time we were all done, we built that into a complete home services business.
Yeah, Four Seasons
because he bought
business.
complementary. Exactly. So there's always something to do for their customers. And here's the really cool thing. It's a little bonus, multi-million-dollar idea if you're paying attention. Businesses that have automatically recurring revenue are valued substantially higher than businesses that don't. So if you take an air conditioning company that only gets paid when they install a new air conditioning unit or fix a new air conditioning unit, they get paid once in a while. Same thing with a plumber. They only get paid when there's a leak. But if you take a home services company that has all of the services in one, and you get your customers on a subscription plan that has you coming out every single month to do something, whether it's snaking drains, putting in your air filters in your HVAC, cleaning your pool, spraying for bugs, whatever it is, they're coming out. And the kicker was the guarantee, if you were in their gold program, that if anything went wrong with any system, if you were a member, they guaranteed to be out there within 1 hour to fix it. And if it's 110 degrees in Texas, and your power goes out or your air conditioning goes out, that's something valuable. And so people subscribe for that membership on their credit card every month, automatically recurring. So the multiple of that business went from a 3x multiple of valuation to a 7x multiple of valuation. And it's just exponentially increased the value of that business. So
yeah, it's the
something
gym,
to think about.
It's a gym model, right? Or in the old days,
Yep.
talk about dating ourselves. In the old days, it was the video store model where you paid a fee, a monthly fee, and you can go in and get 5 movies at a time and just bring back 5, get another 5, kind of like a brick and mortar Netflix of the day.
Netflix is how that's how it really started was DVDs. Yeah.
Yeah. You've mentioned that there are hundreds of potential funding strategies. You talked about the SBA loan, for example, expansion loans. What are some of the ways entrepreneurs can finance acquisitions beyond that without draining their own cash reserves?
Oh, there's literally, we have a spreadsheet of over 230 options. I'll touch on just a couple of them, but there's revenue-based funding, RBF, which is basically borrowing against the revenue of the company. There's asset-based funding. So if a business has assets, if it has equipment or machinery or vehicles, etc. Those can be borrowed against to do an acquisition. Seller financing is, most 65% of small business acquisitions involve some level of seller financing, meaning the owner of the company that sells it carries back some of the loan against that. That's very common. There's earn outs, there's earn ins. We've seen deals where part of it was put on a credit card. We've seen all sorts of things. You can borrow against a 401k, and I'm not saying take money out of your 401k. You should never do that. You'll get hammered on taxes and penalties. But you can, with certain 401ks, you can borrow against a 401k, and guess what? When you do that, you're paying yourself interest. You can borrow up to $50,000 against a 401k.
Yeah.
And so why not borrow from yourself and pay yourself interest? So those are just a couple of quick examples of things that we use, fairly common. And then there's all sorts of different, what we call OPMs, or other people's money, right? So getting co-investors involved, getting letters of credit from, family members or business associates that want to come along and invest or support the venture, whether they're an equity investor or a debt, a debt provider. There's just so many different ways you can get really, really creative. I just have a deal this week I'm working on where we're working on a situation where it's sort of a competitor situation, buying a competitor, but they're not direct competitors. But the buyer is going to do a promotion to sell the seller's products to their list before the acquisition happens, and then all of the capital that's raised through that promotion, the money goes right into the pockets of the current owners of the business, but they're going to credit 50% of that capital towards the down payment on the acquisition. So the buyer of the business is going to go out and kind of earn their down payment by selling the seller's products. And I came up with that idea. So there's just a lot of different ways you can come up with capital to do acquisitions and not have to expend a whole lot of money.
When it comes time to sell a business, what are the biggest mistakes owners make that reduce the value of their company?
The number one mistake we see them make is not preparing in advance. A lot of times we get calls all the time from owners say, okay, I'm ready to sell my company. And they've done nothing to prepare it for sale. The first thing you should be contacting someone like me, who, and by the way, we're not brokers. My company, we aren't brokers. We're advisors, which is a little bit different. We still sell the business, but we prepare the business for sale. But you should be preparing 3 years in advance. You want to have your financials in order. That takes time. You want to have an operating system in place that every single thing is documented and all your processes and procedures are in place.
SOPs and
SOPs. Yep, exactly. And a lot of businesses, those are shaky at best, and so you want to have those in a good place. When we work with a client, we actually say, who's going to buy your business and why? And then, okay, let's find out what they want and build the business so it suits them, right? Are they wanting this kind of business or that kind of business? Let's actually talk to them. Say, hey, 3 years from now, we're going to be for sale. And what are you looking for when you go to acquire a business? And let's find out now. And if everything isn't the way they want it, let's build it that way so that 3 years from now they're ready. And then a big thing that we see is tax mitigation versus profit maximization. So especially small businesses and entrepreneurial businesses, we see all the time people go, oh man, yeah, I had a really, really good year. I made good money, but I did this, and this, and I did everything I could. And it shows I have no profit. And so I didn't pay any taxes. And it's like, okay, but guess what? Businesses are valued on profit. So if your business on paper looks like it makes no money, who's going to want to buy it?
Isn't there an amount of recast earnings that savvy buyers would look at that put back
there
in?
There is, but
like overpaid owners and things like that.
Right. You still can do that, but there are still that just when I say clean financials, that's what I'm talking about. Why say, well, this is what I told the IRS, but this is what I'm telling you. Okay, wait a minute.
That sends up all sorts of red flags right there.
It does.
Right.
And so why don't you just have your books clean in the first place? So I tell owners, like, if you know you're going to sell, then 3 years in advance, you need to start thinking about doing it, because you take $1 off the profit line to save 20 cents in taxes.
Right.
But guess what? That dollar of profit at a 5 times multiple is $5. So
Right.
you're saving 20 cents now and you're giving up $5 later. And so why even get into that whole recast and everything else and start throwing the red flags when let's focus on what matters now, and let's make your books work. So those are just some examples of the things that we look at when we're working with a client to help them get ready to sell. And you got to prepare your team. You've got to prepare, who's going to take that business over when you leave. Do you have a succession plan? If not, then it limits the options of new owners, because new owners, if they want to buy the business and operate it themselves, great. But if they want to buy a business that they don't have to operate, and your business isn't set up that way, then you've just eliminated half your buyers.
Sure.
Right? So if you're leaving and you don't have somebody trained to run the business, and the new owner doesn't want to run it either, they're walking away and they're not going to buy it. So you've just limited your buyer pool. So those are some of the things we work with to help owners maximize their exit. And we like to do it 3 years in advance. We can do it 2 years or 1 year. I mean, the longer we have, the better we can do.
Well, you're playing a long game. That's good. That's
absolutely,
because
there's millions of dollars at stake. Why not think ahead?
I don't want to get into your financial model, but in general terms, when do your clients start paying you? Do they pay you during that 3 years, or do they pay you when they sell? I know you're an advisor, so that seems to see there would be a model for
we're being compensated for that
pay
3
for your
years
time.
Yes.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
But however, we do put part of that compensation into the ultimate outcome. We aren't just, we don't just get paid and then our advice doesn't matter. We want our advice to matter, because we do take,
you have a horse in the race,
skin in the game on. Exactly.
Yeah. A skin in the game.
So,
yeah.
It works for everybody.
Last question, because we're about out of time. How did you define success when you first started your company, and how do you define it today?
So, Mike, that's a great question. How do I define success? And I think I have to define that, or when I think about that for my business and all the businesses that I've ever had, I have to go back to when I was 17 years old, and I was in a personal development program that was written by Zig Ziglar.
Mm-hmm.
And Zig Ziglar had a saying that I have tried to live my life by my entire life. And I also operate my businesses. And that is, you can have anything in life you want if you help enough other people get what they want. And I've always tried to run any business that I've had with that in mind. Deliver great value and great service to my customers, and the rest will fall into place. And that's all I've ever tried to do. And that's all I continue to do.
That is great advice. I've learned that the hard way. I used to have profit goals, revenue goals, market share goals. And each time I focused on any one of those, it was always at the expense of the other, right? Mm-hmm. And I finally learned through a mentor of mine that profit, sales, market share, pick your KPI, are the results of good decisions. Make great decisions. The rest will follow. And the problem with coming up with a revenue goal, if you have a revenue goal and you work every day at accomplishing that goal, you'll probably hit it. But what if you were meant to do more? You probably won't overshoot it either. You almost manifest what you seek.
True.
And so I had a banker come in, this is several years ago. I thought he was going to commit suicide right there in front of me, because he says, he's filling out, it's one of those proof of life things. They have to come once a year and actually go into the brick and mortar, meet with the owner. So it's one of those obligatory things. And he's got a checklist. And one of the checklist items was, what's your revenue goal for this year? And I said, we don't have one. And he looks at his paper, and there's no checkbox for that answer, right? And he goes, well, no, I mean, come on. Seriously, I can't put you don't have one. You got to give me some number. I said, well, I can give you a number if that's what you want, but that's not what I mean. I mean we don't preset revenue goals. He goes, how can you run a business without that? I said, and then I explained that we think revenue is a result of good decisions. Profit is a result of good decisions. If we don't get the number that we need to stay in business or grow, then we know there's something wrong with our decision model, and we need to work on making better decisions. And we know we are making great decisions by the KPIs. And he goes, I can't write all that down. I said, well, okay. So I just said, just add 20% to last year's number. And he was happy.
He probably was happy with that. Yeah.
It was BS. I mean, we probably did that or more, but banks are very methodical. They have their systems and their ratios and, debt to equity and, all that stuff. They got to hit that. I understand that. It's the golden rule. They have the gold, therefore make the rules.
They get to make the rules. Yep.
Right. But I totally agree with you. I could not agree more that just concentrate on making the best product you possibly can, best in class. Concentrate on treating your customer like royalty. Just be a good steward of your business and maybe try and make the world a better place. Throw some philanthropy in for good measure.
Sure, absolutely.
I think all those things come back in multiples. And that's what I've learned. So I don't worry about the numbers. I mean, it's not quite sincere. There's always something in the back of my mind.
The numbers will take care of themselves.
The numbers, I have 100% confidence the numbers will take care of themselves. And if they don't, we adjust the ingredients until the cake comes out perfect. And, if we just concentrate on the salt and we concentrate on the eggs and we concentrate on the yeast or whatever, try baking bread or whatever, just concentrate on making great bread, if that's the example. Concentrate on doing that. If you put too much emphasis on one of the multiple factors that build a successful business, you'll obtain one thing at the cost of all the others. I used to fly planes, and every pilot knows this. You're trained to do three things simultaneously: aviate, navigate, and communicate. And anytime there's a civilian plane crash, it almost always, 95% of the time, comes down to the flight crew stopped doing one of those three things because they were concentrating on one of those things. And I think the same principle, aviate, navigate, communicate, can be applied to business. You can't concentrate on one problem at the expense of everything else. You need to just keep making great decisions. I think you and I are quite aligned in that philosophy. It hasn't failed me, Marty, and it clearly hasn't failed you. So for my audience that are listening or watching, if you're watching this on YouTube, look down here where it says see more, and you'll get information on Marty's company there. And if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast app, look at the podcast app's show notes, and that information will be there as well. Marty Fahncke, thank you so much for being my guest today. You've been very insightful. I love, we're more aligned than you think in terms of our business philosophies, and it took me 34 years to get to this point. I think you've accomplished that a little sooner than me. So you're a quicker study than I am.
Same amount of time, but yeah.
Same amount of time?
Mike, it was great to be here. Thank you so much. It was a great talk.
Thank you. Yes, I enjoyed our conversation. Have continued success to you, Marty, and the multiple new companies you're going to end up buying and selling.
Thank you very much, sir. Have a good one.
As we wrap up this conversation, one of the things that really stands out is how differently Marty looks at business growth compared to the many ways entrepreneurs think about it. Most entrepreneurs assume growth has to come from selling more products, adding more customers, or working longer hours. But Marty reminds us that there is another path. Sometimes the fastest way to grow a business is by acquiring one that already has customers, revenue, and systems in place. Another important takeaway is the idea of building your business so that it could be sold, even if you have no intention of selling it anytime soon. When a company has strong financials, documented processes, and a structure that doesn't depend entirely on the owner, it becomes far more valuable and far more resilient. Entrepreneurship often begins with passion and persistence, but over time, it also requires strategy and foresight. Understanding how businesses are valued, how acquisitions work, and how exits happen can give entrepreneurs far more control over their future. Now, that's a wrap. Thanks for being part of our Reluctant Entrepreneur family. We have been exceptionally busy recording future episodes with fascinating guests, so be sure to subscribe to get notified when new episodes drop. And one favor, if you're watching this on YouTube, consider giving us a like and subscribe. Those two simple clicks really help us expand our reach. If you're an entrepreneur or know someone who would make a great guest, I'd love to hear from you. Visit reluctantentrepreneur.podcast.com to apply or recommend a guest. And of course, a very quick shameless plug. If you're interested in my book, The Reluctant Entrepreneur, Anatomy of a Business Startup from Uncertainty to Unstoppable, it's available in paperback and Kindle on Amazon and as an audiobook on both Audible and Amazon. That's it for me. I'm out of time. Thanks again for listening or watching. Until next time, be unstoppable. I'll see you again soon.